I'd like to get on to your memories of some interesting, when you were a young fella, there must have been some older people in town that got your attention and got your interest.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember who some of these persons might have been?
Well, I tell you, the one was what they called Old 91. He was Klingler. He was the one that invented the coupler.
Yeah. Did you know how he got his nickname of 91?
No, there's a question I cannot answer.
Well, let me share with you how it came to pass. There was an animal menagerie act going through on the railroad, and they were sitting on the porch of the Central Hotel that faces the railroad, and some zebras went through, and someone says to Mr. Klingler, "How many stripes does a zebra have?" And he says, "Oh, about 91. And from that point on, he was known, and his nickname was 91 Klingler. We'll just throw that in. But he did invent or develop this coupler, yeah. And you brought a model along. We'll get that just a little bit later. But tell us something about the man himself.
Well, he had a son, and he had a daughter. And the daughter was married to a deamer. And his son well, I believe his name was Frank. Mm-hmm. And they called him Doc because he always peddled what we call Balm of the Life. And after he started peddling that Balm of the Life, why, he got the nickname Doc Klingler. Mm-hmm. So, of course, his dad was the one then that had invented the coupler.
Well, what sort of a person was 91?
Well, now I'll tell you, I can't just exactly express what kind of a fellow he was. But he was very nice to talk to, and he got lots of letters from the government and from foreign countries about his coupler. And every time I walked to the orchard, well, I had to stop in and read these letters. And of course, I read them to him, but I didn't pay no attention to him. I wasn't interested in him that much, you know. So he had got one letter in particular from Italy. I don't know who from, but it was from Italy. And they told him that they knew that he hadn't got the money for inventing the coupler. And they told him if he'd sign this letter and send it back, well, he could stop all the railroads that they're using his coupler. And he wrote back and told them to keep on using it. It didn't bother him. So then he didn't get no money out of it either.
Now, was he illiterate? He himself could not read? Is that the way it is, or?
He could read a little, but not that amounted to anything.
So these letters were just above his capacity to read?
Yes, and I was too young, they were above my capacity, but I could read them.
And you just read them aloud to him?
Yeah, and that was all there was to it.
You didn't explain, or did he question what something meant, or?
He didn't question anything.
Well, did you tell me one time that he got a letter offering him royalties of a penny a mile?
No, I don't remember anything like that.
Well, someone told me he got a letter from Europe that they offered him a royalty of a penny a kilometer, I guess it was, since they don't use miles except in England. And he says, oh, that wouldn't amount to anything, so forget about it. And yet there are hundreds of thousands of kilometers of railroad, and this meant a penny per car shipped. It would have amounted to millions of dollars, but he just says, oh, forget about it. That doesn't amount to that much.
Well, that there was a little bit like Waller. Waller had something that you could, you know, they used wooden ties. Mm-hmm. And he had something that you could fasten the rails to steel ties. And he was going to sell it to the railroad company. And the railroad company offered him a penny a tie. He says there wasn't enough money. He said he wouldn't even show him how it worked. And he left it go like that.
There's something like 4,000 ties to the mile, and therefore that would amount to a penny a tie would amount to $40 a mile, and thousands and thousands of miles of railroad,
He said it wasn't enough money, so he said, forget about it.
Well, he must have gotten that out of his dad. His dad must have had an influence on him there. Can you share with us how Mr. Klingler might have got the idea and what he did about it and the ups and downs of going through this thing?
Well, I tell you, with the ups and downs, the people from Beavertown, he didn't have the money to get it patented, to take it down to Washington to get it patented. And the people from Beavertown gathered money to send the lawyer down to get the thing patented. And they sent the baker from Beaver Springs. He was a lawyer. They sent him down. And of course, a couple of days, well, he come back. And they asked him how he made out. He says, I didn't get nothing. He said, the patent office was closed, and he says, I left it lay down there. Well, then a couple of years later, why, Baker went west and bought a lot of farms. So I guess according to that, I don't know, but they claim that he sold out to another company down there in Washington, and he got rich through it.
Mm-hmm. But Mr. Klingler didn't.
Mr. Klingler didn't get anything.
Well, I heard one time that he was so elated over some happening that he lit a cigar with a large denomination bill in the hotel.
Yeah, that there he did.
Well, how did that come about?
Well, he thought, that was Mr. Klingler, and he thought he was going to get a lot of money, and he took, I believe it was a 10 or a, I don't know if it was $10 or $20 bill, and lit his cigar with it. And he thought that was big, you know, and of course he found out later on then that he wasn't getting no money.
Uh-huh. Now, the $20 back in those days probably would have bought a month's worth of groceries.
I bought a couple months worth of groceries.
Yeah, so that was that was certainly a...
See, that was, what year was it now that he, I believe it was around the 1900. But it was around the 1900 when these ore mines out here closed up. And I don't know what year, what year it was that he
developed this.
Yeah.
Thing. But you were a young man when he was still trying to do something with it. He was getting all this correspondence on it.
He was getting the correspondence, and of course, it's like I said, I was too young to take interest in it. I could read the letters and everything, and I didn't think much of it when I read the letters, you know.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's just pause for a moment, and then perhaps you can show us this coupler and explain a little bit of how it works. It'll require a different camera setup, so we're going to pause momentarily and reset up and show everyone the Klingler coupler. Now we're back, and Mr. Aigler, perhaps how did you come to acquire this Klingler coupler model?
Well, I'll tell you how I come to acquire that there. You know, out there, we used the road that went into Klingler's house. And his dad was deceased then already. And then I told Doc about this. I said, Doc, I said, you have to help fix the road up. Oh, he says, I can't. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll fix it up if you give me that little piece of coupler that your dad carried around in his pocket. I said, I'll fix the road if you give me that. And of course, he gave me this here. And then before his dad passed away, he had the first steel coupler that was made, you know, and he had it out there at the barn, and he wanted me to take this thing along home. I said, what do I want with it? I said, I can't even handle it or anything, I said. So I don't even know what ever become of it.
But the very first steel coupler ever made used to be in a barn here near Beavertown.
Yeah.
Wasn't it up at the, going up toward the reservoir? Wasn't that the farm they lived at?
Yep, it was up there where
Ernest lived later on.
Mm-hmm. And it was sitting outside of the barn on a scaffolding or something, and he was after me to take this coupler out. I said, I don't want it. And I never did take it either, and I don't know if I ever got to it.
You say he got the idea of the coupler from the way hands...
Yeah, the way your hands hooked together.
And as I understand, the way the couplers were before that, the people who coupled trains got their fingers smashed and their knuckles busted, and this was automatic. It saved human limbs and hands and everything else from getting smashed, and that's why it was so popular.
Yeah.
It saved a lot of injuries.
Well, the way they were coupled before was through a heavy chain and bumper blocks.
Yeah.
That's what they had on. And then they had to get between these bumper blocks to hook up the chain, you know. And after he got the coupler made like this, why it worked automatically, you see.
Yeah, yeah. And that, of course, was a big improvement. And by the way, they're still using the Klingler coupler today.
Today.
Yeah. Now, in the little intermission we had, we were talking about another orchard, Mr. Musser's orchard, was
Yeah,
it?
I forgot about him.
And what was his name again?
Aaron.
Aaron Musser.
Aaron Musser, Mort McDowell started that orchard, and then when Mort, I don't know, he sold it then to Aaron Musser. And of course, Aaron Musser, let's see, after Aaron Musser had it, he didn't tend to it, and of course...
it went to seed, so to speak. But the majority of the orchards were located right to the south of Beavertown, along that first ridge there, from, I guess, what we'd call the Maples today, all the way up to, going up toward Shawverville, right?
Up toward Shawverville.
Well, doesn't Charlie Miller still have a little orchard of some kind?
No, he bought the orchard off of Art Felker. Art Felker had planted this orchard, and he bought it off of Art, and well, the brick plant bought it. And then they wanted me to to rent that orchard, and I told them what I'd give, and then the fellow that I talked to, he was agreed. So of course he took it back to the Reading, to the president, and the president said no. He said they wouldn't give it to me for that. He said they want $900 a year rent, and they paid $3,600 for it. I said, well, you don't even think I'm going to pay that orchard for you in 4 years? I said, I won't give you that. Well, he said, what will you give? I said, well, I'll tell you what, the highest point I'll give you is $100 for the year. Well, then they said, nope, they wouldn't do it for that. So they talked Harold Hassner into it, and Harold gave him $200 a year rent for the orchard. And then, of course, Harold used it for a couple of years, and he didn't take care of it the way it should have been. And of course, then there was nothing. Then Miller bought it off of the brick plant. And of course, then Miller had it for about 2 or 3 years. He planted a bunch of peach trees, and the first year the peach trees were going to bear, it hit a frost, and he froze out. And then he quit right there. He said he wasn't going to bother with the orchard anymore.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were the last fella of Beavertown to have an orchard, and you sold out what, in 1984? Do you remember the exact date?
September the 10th, 1984.
So that's less than 6 months ago, about 6 months ago now. You've been out of the business.
That's right.
And you're the last fella that in Beavertown that was in it. So we just want that for the record.
That's right.
I'll tell you, there's some other things that I had hoped to talk about tonight, but if you don't mind, we're going to talk to your older sister now for a few minutes on some other things.
That'll be fine.
Okay.